Every movement in the ocean costs energy, and for something this large, the cost never stops. In a world ruled by survival, two apex predators emerged, competing for the same limited resources. The ocean was vast, but even vast systems have limits when giants depend on constant energy intake. Megalodon dominated with raw size and power, built to overwhelm massive prey with devastating force. Livyatan was different, a whale with crushing teeth, capable of hunting using intelligence and precision. These predators shared the same ocean, hunting the same prey, driven by the same survival demands. But the ocean was not infinite, and balance only existed while energy supply remained stable. Warm waters once supported dense ecosystems, providing enough food to sustain even the largest hunters. Whale populations were abundant, moving through oceans that were rich with life and energy. During this time, both predators thrived without direct confrontation or violent competition. They did not need to fight because the system provided enough for both to survive. But stability in nature is temporary, and environmental change is always inevitable over time. As global temperatures began to drop, ocean productivity slowly declined across ecosystems. Plankton populations reduced, and this small shift affected the entire marine food chain. Fish populations became less dense, and whales traveled greater distances to survive. With prey harder to find, the cost of hunting increased for every predator. Megalodon required enormous energy daily, and its massive body demanded constant feeding. It relied on ambush and power, attacking large prey with overwhelming force from below. A successful hunt could sustain it, but failure meant wasted energy and rising risk. Livyatan approached hunting differently, using echolocation to track prey even in darkness. Its ability to detect movement through sound gave it a strong advantage in deep waters. Livyatan made calculated decisions, reducing wasted energy and improving hunting efficiency over time. While Megalodon relied on speed and impact, Livyatan depended on control and precise targeting. These strategies allowed both predators to coexist without direct conflict for long periods. But as the ocean changed, these advantages began to shift under environmental pressure. Cooling temperatures disrupted migration patterns, forcing prey into unfamiliar and distant routes. Both predators encountered each other more often while tracking shrinking food sources. The space between successful hunts increased, and survival margins became dangerously thin. Energy became more valuable than dominance, and conflict was avoided whenever possible. Even when crossing paths, both predators chose efficiency over unnecessary aggression. Avoidance did not solve the problem, because the ecosystem itself was collapsing gradually. The energy flow that once sustained giants weakened across every level of the ocean. Megalodon's size, once its greatest advantage, slowly became a critical weakness. It required more food than the ocean could consistently provide under new conditions. Livyatan faced similar challenges, despite its intelligence and adaptive hunting behavior. Even efficient hunters cannot survive when the entire system begins to fail. As prey declined, both predators traveled further and used more energy. Hunting success dropped, and the balance between effort and reward worsened. Every failed hunt carried greater consequences, pushing both species toward their limits. Eventually, the ocean could no longer support two predators of such enormous scale. The system did not collapse instantly, but slowly shifted toward imbalance and instability. Resources became scarce, and competition increased without direct confrontation. Eventually, there was simply not enough energy to sustain both predators together. One began to disappear first, fading gradually without a dramatic ending. Livyatan populations declined, leaving too few individuals to sustain the species. Without recovery, the species vanished completely from the ocean. Megalodon remained, but its survival was already under serious threat. The absence of competition did not restore balance, because the system was failing. Prey remained scarce, and the energy deficit continued to grow. Megalodon's massive body became increasingly difficult to sustain in this environment. At the same time, smaller predators began adapting more efficiently to changing ocean conditions. These new hunters required less energy and survived longer on smaller, more available prey. Efficiency slowly replaced size as the dominant survival strategy in the evolving ecosystem. Megalodon could not adapt fast enough to this rapid environmental transformation. Over time, its presence faded, leaving no descendants to continue its dominance. The ocean did not collapse, but instead reorganized into a new balanced system. Life continued, but under different rules shaped by efficiency rather than raw power. Modern predators emerged, smaller and more adaptable to changing environmental pressures. The age of giants ended, replaced by a system driven by sustainability and balance. But the underlying principle of survival remained unchanged across the entire ocean. Energy determines survival, and every organism must exist within environmental limits. No predator, regardless of strength or size, can escape the constraints of a finite system. Even the most dominant species fall when energy demand exceeds available resources. The ocean continues evolving, constantly adjusting to climate and ecosystem changes. Life adapts, forming new patterns that maintain balance within shifting environments. The disappearance of giants is not failure, but part of a natural evolutionary cycle. New species rise, filling ecological roles left behind by those that vanished. Balance is restored through transformation, not permanence or dominance. The ocean remains vast and powerful, but governed by invisible energy rules. These rules shape every interaction, from microscopic life to massive predators. What once dominated can vanish, replaced by forms better suited to new conditions. The cycle continues endlessly, driven by adaptation and the flow of energy. Every ecosystem exists only as long as conditions allow it to survive. When those conditions change, even the strongest species must face extinction. The ocean does not remember, but its structure reflects everything that lived within it. fossils remain as silent evidence of a world once ruled by giants. But the present ocean is different, shaped by millions of years of change. Modern predators thrive because they are efficient, not because they are stronger. Efficiency ensures survival when resources are limited and unpredictable. And survival always belongs to those who adapt the fastest. In earlier oceans, size offered dominance, but only while resources remained abundant. As conditions changed, the balance shifted towards species that required less energy. Large predators became increasingly vulnerable as their energy demands remained constant. The system no longer supported massive hunters that depended on large prey. This increased energy cost reduced the margin for survival significantly. Even successful hunts no longer guaranteed long-term sustainability. The ocean was becoming less predictable and more demanding for large predators. Every decision carried greater risk as resources continued to decline. Survival depended not on strength, but on efficiency and adaptability. Megalodon's strategy remained effective, but only under conditions that no longer existed. Its reliance on large prey made it vulnerable to shifts in ecosystem structure. As whale populations declined, its primary food source became increasingly scarce. Each hunt required more effort, with lower chances of success over time. Livyatan faced similar challenges despite its advanced hunting abilities. Even intelligence could not overcome the limitations of a collapsing ecosystem. Both predators were bound by the same environmental constraints. And those constraints were tightening across the entire ocean. The system no longer supported the existence of multiple apex giants. One had already disappeared, and the other was following the same path. The decline was gradual, almost invisible, but consistent across generations. Fewer individuals survived, and reproduction rates dropped significantly. Without enough offspring, recovery became impossible over time. The species slowly faded, leaving no trace in the living ocean. There was no sudden extinction event, only a steady disappearance. The ocean continued functioning, unaffected by the loss of its largest predator. Other species adapted quickly, filling ecological roles left behind. Smaller predators expanded, taking advantage of reduced competition. The system reorganized into a more efficient and sustainable structure. Balance returned, but under completely different conditions. The new ocean favored speed, adaptability, and lower energy consumption. Large size was no longer an advantage in this changing environment. Survival now depended on flexibility and efficient resource use. Modern sharks and marine mammals reflect this evolutionary shift. They require less energy and adapt more easily to environmental change. Their success is not based on dominance, but on sustainability. The ocean rewards those who fit within its limits, and punishes those who exceed them over time. This balance is constant, even as species rise and fall. The rules remain unchanged, even when the players are different. Every ecosystem operates within boundaries defined by available energy. When those boundaries are exceeded, collapse becomes inevitable. Megalodon and Livyatan both reach those limits during environmental change. Their extinction was not sudden, but the result of long-term imbalance. Energy supply could no longer sustain their massive biological demands. Without sufficient resources, survival became mathematically impossible. Nature does not allow exceptions to these fundamental rules. Even apex predators must obey the limits of the system. The ocean enforces balance through gradual but unavoidable change. And that change reshapes life across every level of existence. Today, the ocean appears calm, but its history is filled with transformation. Every layer of water holds evidence of past ecosystems and extinct species. The disappearance of giants is part of a repeating evolutionary pattern. New species emerge, adapted to conditions that no longer support older forms. The cycle continues, driven by energy availability and environmental change. Life persists, but only in forms that fit within current system limits. The ocean is not static, but constantly evolving and reshaping itself. Every species exists temporarily within this shifting balance.
The Megalodon used ant predation, sensing electrically,
and no dominance lasts forever in a changing environment. The rise and fall of predators is part of a continuous cycle. Megalodon and Livyatan once ruled, but their time eventually ended. Their extinction reshaped the ocean, allowing new species to emerge. The system adapted, maintaining balance through change and replacement. What disappeared made space for new forms of life to evolve. This process continues today, unseen but always active beneath the surface. The ocean's power lies not in permanence, but in constant transformation. Every predator, no matter how dominant, exists within temporary conditions. And when those conditions change, survival becomes uncertain. The story of these giants is not just about power, but limitation. Because in the end, every system is defined by energy and balance. But even stable systems can collapse when pressure builds slowly over long periods of time. The ocean was changing in ways that were not immediately visible to its largest predators. Temperature shifts altered currents, and currents controlled the distribution of life. As currents changed, the foundation of the food chain began to weaken further. Plankton declined in key regions, reducing the energy entering the entire ecosystem. This reduction spread upward, affecting fish, whales, and eventually apex predators. Every level of the system felt the impact, but larger animals suffered the most. Their energy requirements were simply too high for the new environmental conditions. What once supported giants was no longer capable of sustaining them consistently. The imbalance continued to grow without any sudden or dramatic turning point. Megalodon continued to hunt, but each success required more effort than before. Prey became scattered, forcing longer pursuits across increasingly empty ocean spaces. The energy gained from each hunt barely compensated for the energy spent. Over time, this imbalance created a slow but unstoppable decline. Livyatan faced similar struggles, even with its advanced sensory capabilities. It could locate prey efficiently, but prey itself was becoming increasingly rare. Intelligence could not create energy where none existed in the system. Both predators were reaching the limits of what their environment could support. Survival was no longer about dominance, but about enduring scarcity. And scarcity was becoming the defining condition of the ocean. As resources declined, overlap between predators became more frequent and unavoidable. They followed the same migration routes, drawn by the same diminishing prey sources. Encounters increased, but conflict remained rare due to high energy costs. Fighting would waste energy that neither predator could afford to lose. Instead, they relied on avoidance, maintaining distance whenever possible. But avoidance did not reduce competition because both still needed the same prey. The system forced them into indirect competition through shared resource dependence. Every successful hunt by one reduced opportunities for the other. This silent competition intensified as prey numbers continued to decline. And the ocean offered no alternative solution to this growing imbalance. The decline of Livyatan began gradually, with fewer individuals surviving each generation. Reproduction rates dropped as energy shortages limited the ability to sustain offspring. Over time, the population became too small to maintain genetic stability. Without recovery, extinction became unavoidable for the species. Livyatan disappeared without a sudden event, fading from the ocean entirely. Its absence marked the end of one of the ocean's most powerful predators. But the system remained unstable, and the underlying problem was unresolved. Megalodon still faced the same environmental pressures that caused Livyatan's decline. The disappearance of competition did not restore balance to the ecosystem. Instead, it highlighted the severity of the energy shortage across the ocean. Megalodon continued to exist, but its survival was becoming increasingly fragile. Each generation faced greater difficulty in finding enough food to sustain growth. Juveniles struggled to reach maturity, reducing overall population stability. The distances required to hunt became greater, increasing energy expenditure further. Even successful hunts were no longer sufficient to ensure long-term survival. The system had fundamentally changed, and Megalodon could not adapt quickly enough. Its massive size, once a symbol of dominance, became its greatest limitation. Energy demand exceeded supply, creating an unsustainable biological equation. Over time, the population declined until it could no longer sustain itself. And like Livyatan before it, Megalodon eventually disappeared from the ocean. The extinction of Megalodon did not disrupt the ocean, but instead allowed it to rebalance naturally. Without giant predators consuming vast amounts of energy, the system began stabilizing again. Smaller predators expanded their roles, filling ecological gaps left by extinct species. These animals required less energy and adapted more easily to changing environments. The ocean shifted toward efficiency, favoring species that could survive with limited resources. This transformation reshaped marine ecosystems across the entire planet over time. Life continued, but under a new structure, built on sustainability and adaptability. The disappearance of giants created opportunities for new forms of life to evolve. Evolution did not stop, but instead accelerated under new environmental conditions. Every extinction opened space for species better suited to the present system. Modern sharks and marine mammals reflect this shift toward efficient survival strategies. They consume less energy and reproduce more effectively under variable conditions. Their success lies not in size, but in their ability to adapt quickly. The ocean now supports predators that fit within its energy limits. Balance is maintained through diversity and flexibility rather than dominance. This system is more stable because it avoids extreme energy demands. The lessons of the past remain embedded in the structure of modern ecosystems. The rise and fall of giants shape the ocean we see today. Every predator that exists now is part of that evolutionary legacy. And every species continues to operate within the same fundamental rules. Energy flows through the system, connecting every level of life in the ocean. From microscopic plankton to large predators, all depend on this continuous flow. When that flow weakens, the entire system adjusts to restore balance. This adjustment often comes through the decline of energy-demanding species. The ocean does not choose winners, but follows the rules of physics and biology. These rules apply equally to all organisms, regardless of size or strength. survival is not determined by power alone, but by compatibility with the environment. The ability to adapt becomes the defining factor in long-term survival. Species that cannot adapt eventually disappear from the system. And those that can continue to evolve and thrive. The ocean's history is a record of constant change and transformation. Each era brings new conditions that reshape life beneath the surface. Megalodon and Livyatan were perfectly adapted to their time and environment. But when that environment changed, their adaptations became limitations. This shift is not unusual, but part of a repeating evolutionary pattern. No species remains dominant forever in a changing ecosystem. Even the most powerful predators are temporary in the grand scale of time. The ocean moves forward regardless of which species rise or fall. Its structure adjusts continuously to maintain balance across all levels. And life continues within those ever-changing conditions. Today's oceans appear calm, but they are shaped by millions of years of transformation. Beneath the surface lies a history of dominance, competition, and extinction. Each layer of water holds evidence of ecosystems that no longer exist. Fossil records reveal the presence of giants that once ruled these waters. But those giants are gone, replaced by species better suited to current conditions. The ocean we see today is the result of continuous adaptation and change. It is not fixed, but constantly evolving in response to environmental forces. Every species exists temporarily within this shifting balance. And no dominance lasts forever in such a dynamic system. The cycle of life and extinction continues without pause. The story of Megalodon and Livyatan is not just about power, but limitation. Their size gave them dominance, but also made them vulnerable to change. When resources declined, their advantages became liabilities. This transformation highlights the importance of adaptability in survival. The ocean rewards those who can adjust to changing conditions, and removes those who cannot maintain balance within the system. This process is continuous and unavoidable across all ecosystems. Every species is subject to the same underlying rules of survival. And those rules are defined by energy availability and environmental stability. In the end, survival is determined by efficiency rather than dominance. The ocean continues to function as a complex and interconnected system. Every organism plays a role in maintaining balance within this environment. When one species disappears, others adjust to fill its ecological role. This adaptability ensures the continuity of life across changing conditions. The system is resilient, but not without limits or constraints. Energy availability remains the most important factor in determining survival. When energy becomes scarce, the system restructures itself accordingly. This restructuring often leads to the decline of large, energy-demanding species and the rise of smaller, more efficient organisms that can survive within limits. The balance is restored, but never in exactly the same form. The ocean breathes through cycles of growth, decline, and renewal over time. Each cycle brings new opportunities for life to evolve and adapt. These cycles are driven by environmental changes and energy distribution. Life responds to these changes by adjusting its structure and behavior. This constant adaptation ensures the survival of the ecosystem as a whole. Even when individual species disappear, the system continues to function. The loss of giants is part of this natural and ongoing process. Their existence shaped the ocean, even after they disappeared. Their legacy remains in the structure of modern marine ecosystems. And their story reflects the power of natural selection and adaptation. The ocean remains vast, but it is governed by precise and unchanging rules. These rules are not visible, but they influence every aspect of life. Energy flows define the limits within which all organisms must operate. When those limits are exceeded, imbalance leads to decline. This principle applies to all ecosystems, not just the ocean. The rise and fall of species is part of a universal pattern. Adaptation determines which species survive and which disappear. The process is slow, but its effects are permanent over time. The ocean continues to evolve, shaping life in new and unexpected ways. And every species must adjust to remain part of the system. The disappearance of Megalodon and Livyatan mark the end of an era. But it also marked the beginning of a new evolutionary chapter. The ocean adapted, and life continued under new conditions. This transition highlights the resilience of natural systems. Even after significant loss, balance can be restored over time. The ocean's ability to adapt ensures its continuity across changing conditions. Life persists, but only in forms that fit within current limits. And those limits are constantly shifting with environmental change. The cycle of evolution never stops, even when species disappear. It continues, shaping the future of life beneath the surface. The ocean continues to move, carrying energy across vast distances. This movement connects ecosystems and supports life at every level. Even the smallest organisms play a role in maintaining balance. Plankton forms the base of the system, supporting all higher life forms. Without this foundation, no large predator could survive. The entire system depends on the continuous flow of energy. When that flow is disrupted, the effects are felt everywhere. Balance shifts, and species must adapt or disappear. This process has repeated throughout the history of the ocean. And it will continue into the future. The story of these giants reminds us that no dominance is permanent. Power exists only within the limits of the environment. When those limits change, survival becomes uncertain. Adaptation becomes the only path forward for any species. The ocean rewards flexibility and efficiency above all else. And it removes those that cannot adjust to new conditions. This rule applies to all life, regardless of size or strength. The balance of nature is maintained through constant change. And that change shapes the future of every ecosystem, including the vast and powerful oceans of our planet. Energy continues to flow through the ocean, sustaining life in all forms. This flow is the foundation of every interaction and every ecosystem. When energy is abundant, life expands and diversifies across the ocean. When energy declines, the system contracts and simplifies over time. This balance between growth and decline defines the structure of life. Every species exists within this delicate and dynamic equilibrium. And no species can exist outside of it for long. The ocean enforces these limits without exception or bias. Survival depends on alignment with these natural constraints. And those constraints are always changing. The ocean remains vast and powerful, shaped by forces beyond any single species. Its history is written in cycles of dominance, decline, and renewal. Megalodon and Livyatan were part of that history, but not its end. Their story reflects the limits of power in a changing world, and the importance of balance in sustaining life over time. The ocean continues adapting and evolving without pause. Life persists, but always within the boundaries of energy and environment. Nothing lasts forever in a system defined by constant change. But the ocean remains, carrying forward the legacy of everything that lived And in the end, it is energy that decides everything.
Subscribe for crazy facts about the world.